Recently, Nintendo had a Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase. And, well, it received 99,000 likes and 75,000 dislikes. It seems a little bit disproportionate to me, and I don't think people really quite understand how much is going on here. The Direct is actually pretty big, and, well, let's discuss what happened and what this all means going forward.
Dumo Plays.
So there wasn't a ton of announcements. They were just larger than what people seem to think they were. So let's start with what the Direct actually was. It was a mini, which was only 8 minutes long, and it was basically a third-party showcase. So it showed DLC from Cadence of Hyrule. It showed Rogue Company, a third-person shooter. It showed that WWE abomination that I forgot existed after the Direct. Good job selling me that one, 2K. And we got 2 Shin Megami Tensei games, both out in 2021. To start, when the Cadence of Hyrule was announced, it was a pretty interesting announcement. It kind of came out of left field. No one expected an indie studio to get access to a Nintendo franchise like The Legend of Zelda. The DLC would suggest that it's selling pretty well. The game personally isn't something that I'm interested in, but what I am interested in is the idea that other studios can get access to major Nintendo IPs and get a chance at doing something interesting with them. Personally, I find that rather exciting, and I'm just looking forward to seeing who gets a shot at what and what they do with it next. I think Rogue Company is going to be a lot bigger than what people are giving it credit for. It's going to be a competitive game that's cross-platform, cross-save, free-to-play, and 60 frames a second even on the Switch, which is a big deal because the Switch keeps getting knocked back down to 30 frames a second, and that's just not good for competitive. Meanwhile, one other thing they're doing to keep it competitive is that they're keeping controller players with controller players and mouse and keyboard players with mouse and keyboard players. They're also adding gyro controls, and I know they're probably not going to be as good as Splatoon's, but if they're even close, I'm going to be interested to see how they handle that. Do they keep gyro controls with gyro controls? Do they mix them with mouse and keyboard, put them with controller players? If they leave them with controller players, we could end up in a situation where the Switch is actually the best console to play a competitive shooter on. That could be interesting. That WWE game had a terrible ad. I think it was Rumble? I think it was called Rumble. That thing was cringeworthy. I struggled to watch it. Luckily for 2K, I'm not the target audience, and I'm pretty sure the target audience ate that up pretty well. Terrible wrestling acting aside, the game actually doesn't look too bad. It looks pretty fun, and, well, it runs, which is a huge step up from what 2K has done with wrestling on the Switch so far. What about that Shin Megami Tensei announcement? There was 2 of them. And if you're not sure what that is, well, do you remember a couple years ago when Persona 5 blew up, became one of the best-selling RPGs of all time? Well, Persona is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. This is a major RPG release. Now, I know everyone is anxious waiting for news on things like Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Prime 4, but what about the Shin Megami Tensei fans? And they're waiting on Shin Megami Tensei 5. This thing was announced back in 2017. Well, let's look at the Zelda franchise. Since then, Breath of the Wild came out, critical acclaim, tons of sales, loads of awards. They've released a trailer for a sequel, and they also remade a game and released it all in the same amount of time. What about Metroid Prime 4? Well, it was announced after Shin Megami Tensei 5, and since then it's restarted development. And I know a lot of people really want to see this rumored Metroid Prime trilogy, but personally I'm adamant that what they're going to do with the trilogy is they're going to release it at the beginning of the year that Metroid Prime 4 releases as a way to build hype and have sales feed off of each other. Well, guess what? Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is coming out in spring of 2021, with Shin Megami Tensei 5 coming out later in the year, possibly around holiday. At the this is a very similar time frame that I'm expecting out of Metroid when the Metroid Prime series starts releasing. I know we all want news from our favorite series, but so did the Shin Megami Tensei fans. And now they have it. Let's be happy for them. There was one more piece of news that came out of this direct. They said it was a series and that we'd be seeing more this year. And I know, where's the first party games? Well, we have been hearing a lot of rumors about remakes and remasters. That can't be all that Nintendo has planned for us, right? Well, it is possible. Let's cover that real quick. You see, back in 2017, Nintendo was being heavily criticized over their lack of third-party support on the Switch. They responded by saying that it was their job to drive sales and create a large install base that would entice third parties to produce games on their platform. And they claimed it would take about 3 years to do this. So now. And it looks like it's finally coming. We need to enjoy this while we can, because to be perfectly honest, in a couple years, the next gen systems are going to have a large install base as well, and I'm not quite sure how easy it is for Nintendo to pull third-party devs away from them at that point in time. But again, what about Nintendo first party, and why does this mean they're not putting out a bunch of games? Well, did you know that leading up to the Switch, third-party devs didn't have a lot of kind things to say about Nintendo? Well, they were calling them out for Nintendo putting themselves in a position to make all the money on the platform and making it very difficult for third parties to make any money at all. There was actually articles being released about how the Nintendo first-party titles were drowning out third-party games and dominating the sales. The call was for Nintendo to find a way to give third parties some breathing room so that they could actually get some sales in. So far, they've been doing that by controlling the releases. They've been trying to time major releases so that they have a little bit of space around them to get their sales in. And this has been working. For the last 2 years, third-party sales have been up 50% year over year on the Switch. Another thing to remember is that Nintendo has blown through several major titles in the last 3 years. What if this year, knowing that there's going to be a whole bunch of third-party support coming, they decided to give them some room by releasing a little bit smaller titles? We've been hearing about a bunch of remakes and remasters, stuff that's coming out, still first party, but it doesn't dominate the sales as something like Breath of the Wild 2 would. Because let's be honest, what third-party dev wants to compete with Breath of the Wild 2, which is going to dominate sales for months? So, we could be looking at Super Mario remakes and remasters, as well as the rumored Pikmin remaster. And Nintendo claims they want The Legend of Zelda to be an annual series, so we could be getting a remake or remaster of that. I would assume probably the remaster of Skyward Sword, which Aonuma teased a little while back. This would mean that the rest of the year would be filled with third-party support, and I'm sure they have something big planned, but at the same time, it might just be a Mario bundle for the 35th anniversary. It was probably going to be Metroid Prime 4, but again, that had to restart development, so that may have shuffled things around pretty badly for this year. In the end, I would say that I was a little bit disappointed with this Direct, especially before I looked into it and what the announcements actually were and what they meant. Not because of what the announcements were or anything like that, or that I was looking for other announcements. More was that Shin Megami Tensei is still a year off. I was really expecting for the big announcement out of this Direct Mini to be something for this year. We still don't know anything that's coming this holiday, and that kind of concerns me a little bit. Now, I know there's going to be stuff coming, but I would like to know what I'm spending my money on ahead of time. Either way, the Shin Megami Tensei announcement was huge, and I'm very happy for the Shin Megami Tensei fans out there, because they deserved it. They've been waiting a while. And, well, the other announcements, they're pretty good too. They're solid announcements. And even if the game isn't for me, or the games aren't for me, I know they're going to be making a lot of people happy, and I'm happy for them. Now, we get back to this waiting game of trying to find out what the holiday lineup is for Nintendo. Hopefully they say something soon, and hopefully the next partner showcase isn't too far off. In the meantime, let's not get our hopes up for anything crazy out of Nintendo. But personally, I'm pretty excited to see what the third-party devs have in store for us this year. That's all for today. Have a good one.